event is also going to be recorded under a podcast, so people will be able to listen to it later.
You succeeded at achieving something that many people would like to achieve. But your background isn't really in law.
That's right. So, hi everyone, and thanks a lot for coming. Just a few words to introduce myself. My name is Tarek. I've studied at LSESU for the last 3 years, graduated last July as a management student, and now I'm undertaking my law conversion at BPP, which is the university, one of the two universities that do the law conversion course in London. I signed the contract, I was lucky enough to sign a contract with Gibson Dunn in July as well, after undertaking a 3-week vacation scheme with the firm, starting there in September of 2024. So I'm here to guide you guys, as I'm sure you're interested about a career in the law. I hope so. Otherwise, I don't see the utility of you being here, but I'm here to guide you through the process and hopefully be of help.
So what made you go into law in the first place? Because your background is in management. You could run a business.
It was a strategic decision, I think. I went into the management degree knowing I was going to do the law conversion afterwards, because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I was given a very valuable advice before applying. So this was in high school, which was that doing a non-law degree, in my case a business degree, would give me a commercial perspective, an out-of-the-box perspective, and an extra value added to law firms. And that's why I applied to a business degree, because I thought it was the most broad decision, which would include a lot of subjects, which would be useful to me in a law firm. So I applied to the management degree, knowing this would be the means to an end to become a lawyer afterwards. So did everything in my summers to be able to compensate this and have a legal profession internship baggage to then apply to law firms. For substance in the end. So what I did was target American law firms first, because they have a smaller intake, which is a very risky gamble, right? Because a smaller intake means a smaller chance of getting in. But once you're in, you're not just a number, you're one of 8 in my case at Gibson Dunn, which means you have a value to the firm, you have a role, they need you and you need them. Whereas in British law firms, with all my respect to these guys, they do amazing work, but you'll be one of 100 at Clifford Chance, one of 90 at Allen Overy, one of 110 at Linklaters. So that's another risky gamble. You have maybe more chance to get in, but once you're in, you'll get secretarial work, which won't add that much value to you as a trainee compared to American law firms, I think. So I targeted American law firms first. Then, when I had more time, I applied to some UK law firms, which, by the way, I didn't get any offer from them. Because I think UK law firms, they recruit more on an industrial basis, right? It's a lot more by the number. We get the application, we don't like this word, out. Whereas in American law firms, they consider it on a case-by-case basis. They interview a lot of people, so they give the chance to a lot of people to interview, right? Because on your written application, it's you, but it's not really you. Whereas when you're in the interview, that's when you get the chance to prove yourself. So I got a few interviews in American law firms, and then got the offer at Gibson Dunn. It was not a hesitation, because Gibson Dunn was a firm I had come across in first year at the law fair at LSE, and I just fell in love with the firm, everything they told me about it. I went and done some research, spoke to trainees. Gibson Dunn was the choice for me in the beginning, but all of the equivalent law firms in the American industry have amazing ways of doing business, and that's how I basically chose Gibson.
And to what extent did you, so you didn't carpet bomb, you chose the law firms, and then in terms of putting down your application, how much work did you put into tailoring those?
it basically took the whole of my semester from September to December of my third year at LSE, because the strategy of going for American law firms means you have more time to apply, but that doesn't mean the applications will take you less time to do, because you have to show them you want to be in this firm, not just in a firm. So that's tricky because you've never been in this firm before, you don't know anyone at the firm, at this firm usually. So it's hard to show them you belong, you want to belong there. So I put a lot of work in research, speaking to trainees, speaking to associates, even partners sometimes, and try to understand what it is they want in their office and try to be the best version of this description in my application.
Who did you put in?
For UK based. But you have to, I mean, it's risky to do just 5, right? I mean, of 15 I got 3 offers. No, 2 offers, 3 interviews. So it's not, and that I was very lucky. People usually do not get any offer, and that's very normal, right? Usually people apply and reapply, go paralegally and go, it's normal. But you can't do 40, but you can't do 5. So 15 to 20, I think, is a fair number in terms of applications.
So you went and researched them individually, worked out what they do, what they're good at, what they say about themselves, and then worked out how you can present yourself to match those
Exactly.
criteria. Now, in terms of interview, how did you get ready for those?
Interview, that's another tricky part because the interview is a bit stressful. I was interviewed by 4 partners who sat, it was on Zoom, but they sat on a table like this, and they were all together. It was a bit stressful and a bit intimidating.
And that would have been during the pandemic.
It was in
Yeah.
2021. No, beginning of 2022, yeah. So it was on Zoom, but I think now they are still on Zoom, which makes it a bit less stressful for you guys. But to prepare for the interview, I basically spoke to future trainees who did the same process a year earlier. This was the best and the most useful thing to do because the interviews don't really change year after year, and I got very valuable advice from future trainees at Gibson Dunn who gave me a very good insight of what happened during their interviews. So that's what happened. Then I used that to prepare. Gibson Dunn was not a hard interview process relatively. First of all, they didn't have critical thinking tests, these things that we find in usually in British law firms. It was more, they care more about knowing me than knowing whether I can answer a critical thinking question. And then they bet everything on the VAC scheme. So getting into the VAC scheme is not that challenging in American law firms usually, but once you're in, that's what they want to see, because you're in for 3 weeks. They can see where you're good, where you're less good, where you need improvement, if you can be a good addition to their office. So the process was 2 interviews. One was about me, just about my application process, about my application form, and the second one was more critical thinking based, where I had to read an article and then critically summarize and answer questions from the partner related to this article.
Mm-hmm. So they looked at your analytical skills through a text, but you're not a lawyer.
Yes.
So do you think the people with law degrees would get a more of an exam type situation?
No. It's the same process for everyone, and I think non-law students like me were not at all handicapped by this because, first of all, the article was not law related. Then during the VAC scheme, we get a lot of work that's not law related, and the law related work is very straightforward, it's mostly contract based to see how we can structure things, how we can talk about things, how we can include things in our analysis, and whether we have what it takes to be put, basically, I'm quoting a partner here. He said in plain English, I want to know if I can put you in a room with a client, go to the restroom, excuse my French, for 10 minutes, and be able to leave you with this client and know you're not gonna talk about just the weather, right? He wants to know if he can leave me with this client for 10 minutes and know that I can be an intellectual talking partner to this client, right? So if you, in the 3 weeks, show them that you can be in a room with these people, convince them that you can be a valuable addition in terms of work, quality of work, but also, and most importantly, I think, in terms of social interactions, that's what it takes, right? Because I had a big disadvantage compared to law students. I didn't have the academic writing qualifications that they needed. I'm a management student, my course was mainly quantitative, math, finance, stat. I did not have what it took to write law academic texts or even law contractual texts. That was a disadvantage. And I was told that, plain English, straight in the eyes, you do not yet have what it takes to write good contracts for us. But this you're gonna gain it in your 2 years law conversion course. What you have is the social interaction skills that we need to build meaningful relationships with our internal colleagues, co-counsel, and clients. That's what they need.
So what happens then during the back scheme? So you got yourself into a position where they accepted you into a back scheme, different seats. What did you see then?
So there were 2 seats. It was a 3-week vac scheme, 2 seats, 10 days each. We had a choice, but it was not really a choice. We could put three preferred seats in a list, but then they would allocate seats in terms of availability. I was put in employment for the first 10 days, and then in restructuring, corporate finance, which was great. The 2 seats were great because they were very different in terms of what I did in each. And the good thing about Gibson Dunn specifically is that we can, even if I was in employment and financial restructuring, I could and I did ask for work from other practice areas. So I did work for arbitration, and I did work for white collar crime. This is proper to Gibson Dunn because they have a free market system, as they call it, where if you're in the corporate wing, so the transactional wing or the litigation wing, you can do work from other practice areas within these 2 wings. So I was allocated these seats, but I did work for other seats as well.
So when you say work, what was it that you were doing?
To my good surprise, it was very, very intellectually stimulating work. It was not secretarial work that just involved drafting and reviewing. So one example I can give is I was working with a partner I met there on a loan. So his client wanted to lease an airplane. I worked on the loan, and I saw everything that happened during the proceedings. So the meetings, the negotiations with the banks, with the client, with the co-counsel, with the extra counsel, with the opposing counsel, everything that happened, I saw the process, and my task day to day was to review the loan agreements as they amended them and try to find loopholes and maybe problems in these loan agreements, and then come back to my partner and say, this is good, this is not good. And even if my work was going to be reviewed 5 times, it was nice to see that I had a purpose, even as a vac schemer in the firm.
So anything else you think you would have liked to know before you started this process?
Specifically for Gibson Dunn, what you guys should know and what is useful to know is that they're gonna assess, and I think it's the case for similar sister American law firms, they're gonna give you day-to-day tasks which are not prepared, but we also had two pre-prepared tasks, which was one in contract review and one in arbitration, where we all had the same exercise. All 18 of us had the same exercise to review a contract, to write clauses, and this was a bit law related, which I struggled with in the beginning, but then I had help from websites and resources, which Reuters Law, by the way, is a very good resource for that. And then these 2 tasks are extremely important because they are the only tasks which they can assess everybody on the same level. So these I focused a lot on during the 3 weeks. Other than that, the good thing at Gibson Dunn as well, which I think is unique to the firm, I might be wrong about this, every single person who has had an interaction with you during the VAC scheme can give feedback. Anyone. So personally, I got feedback from people I had met once at one talk or one social event, or even the very nice lady from the cafeteria gave feedback about me. She said, so this I did not know before, and just being nice to everyone naturally is crucial at Gibson Dunn, because I can give you a good example of someone from the VAC scheme the year before me who was the best VAC schemer they ever got, right, in the 7 years they run the program. He spoke one time in a mean way to a member of staff, and it didn't take 2 seconds, didn't get the training contract, right? Because this member of staff said, this guy spoke to me in a very condescending way and only was respectful to partners, right? So be respectful to everyone at all times, because you're going to be under a lot of pressure, and it's easy to sometimes lose it, right? Let's be honest, we're all human. Sometimes I worked until 11 p.m. at Gibson Dunn during the VAC scheme, and it was easy to let the stress get the better of you. But in the end, every single person can give feedback, and that's amazing in a way, because you don't even only have feedback from your 2 supervisors, you have feedback from anyone who's had a social interaction with you, who wants to. So an email goes out in the end, says, anyone who's had an interaction with one of our VAC schemers, give feedback if you want to. And it's amazing, because people who I didn't even think would give feedback actually gave feedback and said, this guy's good, hire him.
And you got to see it, did you?
Which one?
The feedback.
Yeah. No, not everything, but we have a feedback call in the end. And for instance, that's an interesting story, because I was looking for Lebanese people at Gibson Dunn on the internal database, and I found there's a Lebanese guy in Dubai. So I reached out on Teams and I was like, hi, I'm in London, a VAC schemer, can we have a call? Just a social call. I was just meaning to connect with Lebanese people at Gibson Dunn. This guy then phones HR in London from Dubai and says, that guy reached out to me in Dubai to speak with me and ask me about my work there. Hire me, right? So that I found out after I had signed my offer. So that's to show you, in American law firms, and I think more specific in Gibson Dunn, human interactions are here, and everything else is one step underneath. That's what I think of it.
The lights then, how do you think, I'm not going to ask you about yours, but
No.
how important are they? Like, what's how much of an indicator is your grade profile?
This is, I hope LSE academic people are not listening to this, because grades don't matter as much as I thought they did. 2-1, thank you very much. That's it. They did not look at one. I mean, maybe that's because I was in a business degree, but I'm sure they will look at every single one of my law modules now. But they required a 2-1, 60 flat, and not even a high 2. I was lucky enough to have a good grade, but they really did not care that much, because, and I asked the graduate recruitment team there, I mean, how important are grades? They said grades are a way to filter you, because we know that if you get a 2-1 at LSE or at an equivalent university, you're a good student. But we want to see how you interact with people. So you get good grades, then you pass all your law modules at BPP, or in your case, if you're LLB students, you have to get a 2-1 in each of your LLB modules. I think that, don't quote me on this, but because at BPP we have to pass each of our law modules. I don't know if in LLB, 3-year LLB courses you have to do the same, but grades,
No, doesn't matter. Yeah.
doesn't matter, yeah. So just a 2-1 total, they don't really care about anything else, basically.
And then what do you wear? Talking about suits.
Suits, full suits.
Full suits, like jacket, tie.
That's VAC
like
schemers.
suit.
Yeah,
Okay.
completely, with a tie and everything, because, and for ladies, very formal tie as well, because you're here for 3 weeks. You do not, the margin for error is way lower than if you're here for 2 years. So in 3 weeks you have to prove yourself, and I think that was the most stressful part of it, is that every single step you make in this office for 3 weeks is assessed, basically. But that does not mean you don't have the right to make mistakes. You do. You have. I did make mistakes during my back scheme, and I did not get everything right. And you will. They do not expect you to get everything right, but they expect you to if you get a mistake, assume it and say, okay, here, this was wrong. I'm gonna make it better here. But in terms of the formality, you have to be at your best, the best version of yourself, basically, for 3 years, for 3 weeks. That's what's most stressful about it. Associates and partners, they don't come in full suits anymore, right? Because after COVID, the era of being formal all the time is a bit less predominant. They wear suits only when they meet with clients, basically.
Before I open the floor for questions, what goes through my head is it going to be as intense going forward, do you think, through your period as a trainee? Do you feel you'll be under constant surveillance?
No. I mean, I know for a fact that when you're a trainee or then an associate, the room, because the period is longer, right? I mean, Gibson Dunn especially, they hire vac schemers for them to stay, hopefully for their whole career at the firm, right? They want to grow their own. Some partners I've met at the firm were there for the last 37 years. 37 years. So they joined when they were a graduate and they are still there now in their 60s. So then once you're in for a long time, the room for error is a bit higher, right? Because you have more time. You don't have to prove yourself in 3 weeks and then they're gonna tell you if you have a job for the rest of your life. So when you're a trainee, you always have to do good because you want to be retained. And when you're an associate, you want to do good because you want to make partner. So the pressure is always here in a way, but over a more extended period of time. So less condensed and less stressful. For 3 weeks, you have to be the best version of yourself every time you walk out or you walk in that office.
Okay, so questions from you guys? Yes, please.
You mentioned you'd be working until 11 p.m. Having done a vacation scheme, what would you say about the work-life balance, and if there's any way to kind of...
It's fine. Really, it's fine. And in your 20s, it's fine, right? I mean, work until 11 p.m., 2 days a week, if you have a big deal, big contract, big transaction, big trial, it's fine, right? And
So it's fine is of course a question of I'm
it's
happy
relative.
with it.
Yeah, it's relative. It's all relative, right?
So can you quantify what you saw the workload was?
Right. So, yeah, again, it's fine, it's relative, right? But my opinion is it's high effort, high reward in this environment, right? So the good thing now is with work from home, everybody was out of the office by 5 p.m., 6 p.m. tops. Then they worked from home until late sometimes, but at least they were at home with their families. So this made it better now. You don't have to be in the office until 11 p.m., midnight. If you have work, you can leave at 5, work from home. So an associate told me that the workload now is good because he leaves at 5, tucks his kids down to bed at 7, starts working again at 9, but from home, in his bed or on his couch, right? So this makes it better. When you have a big transaction or a big trial coming up, you're gonna work late and sometimes you're gonna have to stay in the office, but that's gonna be rather fun because the whole team is gonna be in the office working on this in one big conference room. So when there's a big transaction or a big trial that spans over a long period of time, they book one conference room and it's basically HQ, they call it, right? So everybody stays there, works there. It makes it a bit fun and it's never longer than 2 weeks where you have a lot of pressure. Then it cools down, then it comes back. So
Are there different areas that are more prone to HQ type situations?
in transactions, less, but in transactions sometimes when you have high pressure deals, which need to be done, PE, M&A deals mostly, which need to be done in a certain amount of time, this could be...
private equity and mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, private equity, mergers and acquisitions. So that's one of their, at Gibson Dunn, one of their most important corporate areas. And in litigation, which is more the arbitration when there's disputes side of the business.
Japanese, so that obviously gives you an international perspective. I also know that you speak several languages. So I just wanted to know how you use that to your advantage. You know, coming from an international background, speaking different languages, how can you use that as an asset to applying to firms?
They really like it actually because Arabic more specifically was useful for me because in the London office they only have 2 Arabic speaking people, one being a partner, one being a trainee who now qualified into associate, but they only had 2 Arabic speaking people and one at the junior level. So I did a lot of Arabic work during my back scheme, and I think this is one of the reasons why they picked me, is that I can be one other junior Arabic speaking trainee in the firm. Then the French was a bit useful as well because we did some work with the Brussels office, which had French work. But anyway, point is, languages are useful. International perspectives are useful as well because the firm is really international, and if you're in London, you're going to work with all of the offices at the same time. We had calls in one day with the States, with Asia, with the Middle East, with Europe, with everyone. So it's very interconnected, and to understand what's happening in the world, to understand why the Brussels office is focusing on EU law, to basically know that the EU is headquartered in Brussels, is very basic information. But it shows them that you know why Brussels does EU law, why Paris does more of French civil arbitration work, why the Middle East does oil and gas. So why oil and gas is in the Middle East, right? The US does a lot of financial restructuring because they're big firms, big tech, who buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell. So to show them you understand it, the law understanding is 20% of what you have to have. What I'm learning now at BPP is extremely useful, and what you LLB students are learning as well is extremely useful. But they want, you're going to do private equity, you're going to do arbitration, you're going to do restructuring, you're going to do loans, you're going to do everything that's not law. It's finance, it's environment, it's employment. You need to know what's happening around you in the world, geopolitically, socially, everything. That's crucial. And this is very easy, just following some accounts on Instagram and watching daily news. That's crucial. It's easy, but it's crucial. More than we think, because if you don't know that Saudi Arabia is now betting on oil prices and that we need Saudi Arabia to get oil, whatever, I'm just saying things out of my head. If you don't know this, you're not going to know why the Dubai office has now hired 3 new partners to focus on oil and gas only, or why they opened the new Abu Dhabi office, or why the Dallas office is doing oil work with companies in Dubai as well, because they have oil in Texas. Just an example. But you have to know everything, basically, that's happening.
So you keep up to date with current and economic affairs,
Yes.
through some reliable sources.
Reliable is relative again.
Yeah, well, reliable is probably a good idea, no?
Yeah. But I mean, some people would find the news I read not reliable, right? But
Yeah.
in the end, it's the main ones that we all know, right? So CNN, BBC, these are good ways to do. But financial news as well, Financial Times, Bloomberg, these are usually very reliable sources of financial information. And on the arbitration side, you have the arbitration review, you have the law review, the Law Society of England and Wales has a lot of updates they publish as well. You can read updates from firms specifically. So Gibson Dunn, they publish every time they close a deal, every time. So that's useful as well.
Okay, next question.
That was a point actually I forgot to mention. Social events. They had 3 social events for the back scheme. One of them was the summer party, which was amazing because we got to see the whole office reunited at this event, 100 people basically, and we were just thrown out there, right? Back schemers, first time in, 1 week in actually, it was the first week of the back scheme. They threw us in the summer party, go network, right? And the HR, of course, HR are always here, always watching from one corner of the eye. What is this guy doing? Where is this guy doing? So if you speak only to partners, they're gonna know, this guy thinks he can only speak to partners and make his way. If you don't speak to any partner, this guy is too shy to go speak to partners. So you have to find this balance, which is hard to find, but which you can find in the end. You will find during the VAC scheme of who you speak to, how you speak to them. Just, it's social, right? These social events, by definition, are social. So, what do you do? Have you been in Gibson Dunn for a long time? Is your family in London? Do you like London? Where do you go in your summer vacation? Everything, just social interactions. How would you speak to your friend? How would you speak to your parents? Same thing, right? So, don't see these people as aliens. They are people just like you who go to the same restaurants, maybe a bit more expensive restaurants. But they are people just like us. They are people just like us. I mean, they really do not want you to think they are aliens, basically. So speak to them. As the second social event was there was a trainee event which we got to attend, and there was one closing ceremony, basically, which some people attended as well. But we had a lot of social events with practice areas, with people, so it was really well on the social aspect. I think, on reflection, the whole process is more scary than it looks, basically. So, during my...
Worse than it seems now?
Yeah, the process, I mean, when I was, before starting my applications, it looked like a giant mountain that was unclimbable, basically. But in the end, once you get a grip to it, it's fine. And most importantly, once you're in the firm, that's when you're really gonna get to prove yourself, right? Because they are gonna see you for 3 weeks again. They're gonna watch everything you do, and they're gonna see basically what's happening with you. They're gonna see if they want you in their office full time for 2 years and possibly for 30 years, and they're gonna want. But in the end, don't speak to one person, but don't speak to 50. Build a network that's going to be strong enough for them to advocate for you because there's a final meeting in the end, which is very scary when I put it this way. So 8 partners, they sit in a room, and they have a list, 18 of us, and they debate for hours and hours and hours and hours of who's going to get in and who's not going to get in. And in my case, I waited a week because the people with me on the VAC scheme are all 25, 26 and older. I was 21 when I did the VAC scheme, so this posed a bit of an issue because they unfortunately had to reject people who were 27, 26, who had done a lot of paralegaling work, and they felt like it was a bit tricky to accept me as a 21-year-old in that case. So I had to wait a week extra, which added stress because they had to do extra meetings and make sure everything was in order with the states and with everything. So the process is very stressful after the VAC scheme to wait for the offer, to know, but do not fear rejection. I had, out of 15 law firms, again, 13 rejections. I received one, archived the email, passed on to the next one, right? It's fine. You will have rejections because that's the process. And even if one cycle doesn't work, the next one is gonna work. There's a lot of law firms out there. And even if you do a VAC scheme, because that's a bit harder to get a rejection after the VAC scheme, if you do a VAC scheme and get a rejection, do not lose hope either, because when you're in one of these law firms, you're gonna get another one if you don't get the TC. So all of my friends on the VAC scheme who did not get Gibson Dunn are now either in the final process or already signed another training contract 2 months after leaving Gibson Dunn. So it's fine. The process is fine. You're going to get in the end. There are a lot of ways to get in, and rejection is fine, but work hard because in the end it's totally worth it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've got one more question. So I've heard from a lot of friends of mine, they seem to value especially Gibson Dunn, Scatter, and Pyramid, an intrinsic understanding of business. And I've heard that a lot of people, even if you start a venture, it doesn't really turn out to be successful. The lessons we learn from it seem to be pretty valuable. They seem to be putting a good emphasis on
Wait,
that.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you, but I'm not hearing.
So the point I was making is a lot of these firms, like Kirkland,
Yeah.
Wild especially, seem to be emphasizing that understanding of business.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories of people starting something, not working out, but that really driving like an application. How important would you say that aspect is?
Starting a business.
Yeah.
You mean as applicants
As
to
a
have
student,
started a
yeah,
business?
yeah, as a student.
So it's funny you ask because I started an NGO in Lebanon. I founded an NGO in Lebanon a year before applying, when the crisis was very intense, and this NGO helped people to find jobs. Right, so we had 20 volunteers who worked part time, and we helped 400 people find jobs in the end. This was very useful. I mean, they liked this a lot, Gibson Dunn, because it showed an entrepreneurial side to my application. They liked the fact that I tried to do something, that I endeavored, that I helped, that I got out of my LSE comfort zone management, I did something else. So, and it's easy, it's relatively easy in terms that I didn't have any funding. The NGO did not receive any donation and did not have any cost. It was all online, all Zoom meetings, all social media. So it's not that hard to found, to create something if you have an idea in mind. So if you're lucky enough to have an idea in mind, do it without any hesitation, even if it fails, because then for you, this was the most enriching experience of my life, to work in this NGO. And for them, for Gibson, it showed that I could think out of the box, create something, work on it, make it my baby, and then make it my child, and then make it my adult child. So if you have an idea in mind, don't hesitate, because they like it.
Yes, please.
What's the main difference applying for back schemes in the UK and in the Middle East, for example?
So I applied to two Middle East VAC schemes. I think it's a bit of everything, right? But the most important thing was the advice I got from future trainees, which you're getting from me now, which is invaluable, I think, because this is what I think got me in, right? Applying what I heard, knowing why, the Gibson Dunn is the best choice for me. And I think if I have to summarize them, it's the human value they have. You're not a number, you're a person, they need you, you need them. It's a two-way street. And the work that trainees do is work associates do in other firms. So you do really important work. In every case, usually there's one partner, two associates, one trainee. So it's a very closed circle. You work with them. You have direct access to partners. You usually work with partners every day on their job, which is, I can assure you, not the case in UK firms because of the bigger numbers. Not because the work is not as good, because just the numbers are too big. So 100 people, 100 new trainees a year is huge, right? I mean, how are you going to accommodate?
So the question then is, you identify people who are trainees
Yeah, on LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, best friend, best everything. LinkedIn, you just write future training solicitor Gibson Dunn. And I think that's how
reach
a
out,
lot
write a
of people.
message, thinking of applying, can we talk?
Exactly. But do not ask them broad questions. Don't say, I sometimes receive messages on LinkedIn, not from you. I sometimes receive messages on LinkedIn, hi, tell me everything I need to know about Gibson Dunn. So I'm not going to tell you everything you need to know about Gibson Dunn, right? So we're not, just ask specific questions. What I asked usually was advice on the interview process, and when I got the offer, advice on how to manage there. And I hopped on a call with them. It was better than on LinkedIn. So I asked for if they had time for a call. There was one trainee who now became my friend. We had calls before I joined. She helped me a lot in the process, and she guided me towards everything. And then in the end, that was the best advice I got. But in terms of how I chose Gibson Dunn, I think the VAC scheme helped a lot. But before that, I knew that it was a firm that would make me involved a lot in everything that was happening daily. And then after the VAC scheme, I was even more sure of that because of everything I said. I mean, the work I did, those people, social interactions, people who were genuinely nice. I did not meet one person who was not nice to me in this office. The small size is invaluable, 100 people in London. So, you know, everyone becomes your friend or your or very good colleague, basically. So the small size is very, very valuable, and it's not the case in a lot of American firms. So Kirkland is twice the size of Gibson in London. And this is what made me go there, the size. It's small, it's the same work, same money, but less people. So you, in the end, have the better interaction.
Would you also think super long term in how likely am I to become partner?
I did, actually. And for that, LinkedIn as well, you basically go and see partners. How long did it take from trainee to partner? At Gibson or laterally. And usually, from what I saw, it's between 10 to 15 years, which is fine.
So thank you very much to Abdul for organizing and to you for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you can stay around to
Of course, yeah.
answer some more questions.
Feel free to connect if you want on LinkedIn or anything and ask me further questions.
Great. So thank you very much and have a very good evening.